Brad and Jeremy from Trendy Entertainment. Brad is a senior producer. Jeremy's a technical director. I'm a personal friend of Jeremy's. I worked with him at Tiburon Studio at Electronic Arts for a long time, 8 years, from 97 to 2005. Jeremy was actually there before me and only left, 3 years ago?
Over 4 now.
4 years ago. He was one of the founding members of Rochambeau, then to become Split, and is now also a partner in the Canvas project, I believe, yes? We don't want to talk about that too much. So Jerry's been around Orlando for a while, and Brad has been in Gainesville for a while, I'm sure. So I'm going to turn it over to Brad because I think he's got some things to tell you guys.
Cool. Thank you very much.
All right.
How's everyone today?
Right.
Excellent. First off, thank you so much all for coming out and giving some of your time. Hopefully the food helps. But we're really excited to talk to you guys a little bit about Trendy and a little bit about our history, what we're doing as a studio, where we're going, and then at the end give you guys a chance to ask us questions about how we work as a company. So a little bit about myself first. My name is Brad Loxton. I'm a senior producer at the studio. I've been in the game industry for about 8 or 9 years now. Started off at a small studio in San Diego solving people's tech problems for them. We shipped a game called Saboteur, if you've heard of that, with EA Pandemic. Worked on a couple other small projects, did a lot of Puzzle Quest games on PS3. Moved over to Timegate in Houston and worked there for a number of years. Worked on the Section 8 franchise for a while and worked on a game called Minimum. And then got an opportunity to join Trendy 2 years ago, and that's where I've been since then. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit about Trendy. How many of you guys know who Trendy is or know what we do? Cool. All right, excellent. That'll be a good starting point. By the way, I haven't vetted if this whole thing's going to work well, so we'll see. Hey, sweet. So Trendy started not too long ago, actually, in 2010. And it was a very, very small studio at the beginning. It was the epitome of an indie studio. It was 8 or 9 friends, basically, that had been doing different projects on and off again for a number of years. Honestly, when it started, a number of those people were working sweat equity. They wanted to make a really cool game together. They had a neat idea, and they wanted to see how it was going to work. So they gathered together in Gainesville. I've seen pictures of the first facility they worked at, and it was really sketchy. The smells and the stained carpets and everything you could imagine from a beginning indie studio. And they were really scrappy, worked really, really hard, and they created this game called Dungeon Defenders, which I think maybe some of you guys have heard of before. It actually launched on every platform you can imagine. It started off on mobile, actually, of all places, with a thing. It was actually the first, well, depending on the platform, on one platform it was the first and the other one was the second. It was just tied with Epic's Infinity Blade for the first Unreal 3 game to come out on mobile. So when it came out, people had not really seen anything quite like that before, on the mobile platform at least. And then from there we went to PC, Xbox 360, PS3 on PSN, and we were very, very fortunate for it to be tremendously successful for us. So Dungeon Defenders, that's kind of on our key art. It was a huge surprise, I think, for a lot of the guys at Trendy. They thought, hey, we have a really cool game, we'll see how this goes. And if any of you guys that get into any development, when you're working on your passion project with your friends, you never really know if what you have is cool. You get really close to it, it's hard to tell. But they had something special, and a lot of people played this game. Up to the tune of over 6 million people played Dungeon Defenders 1 across all the different platforms. Our biggest success by far was on PC, on Steam. That was really hit our biggest stride. We released a lot of DLC for Dungeon Defenders 1 and really had a very hardcore community. For a long time, we were in the top 10 concurrent played games on Steam. We bounced around the top 100 for almost 2 years straight. Just a very, very hardcore following. So what happens when you're really successful? Well, you have to grow, usually, because you have a whole bunch of money now and you have things that you want to try doing new. And so that's what Trendy tried to do. Trendy released a whole bunch of DLC for Dungeon Defenders 1. For a while, people called us DLC Defenders, which is kind of a joke, but it's one of the things we did. We got Insight Ventures. I don't know if any of you know who they are. They're a very, very prestigious, massive venture capitalist firm based out of New York, I believe. And they came in and partnered with us and invested into Trendy to see us grow even further because they believe in kind of the future of the studio, what we were trying to do. We grew to 100 plus developers within 2 years. So you can imagine we started with this little core of 9 people, and then the studio exploded. And over a very, very short period of time, kicked off 3 different projects. One was Dungeons and Defenders 2, which some of you guys have probably heard, was once upon a time a MOBA. And that was in development for about 1.5 years or so as a MOBA. We kicked off this thing called Playverse, which is our back-end services platform. And we kicked off actually multiple unannounced projects that people will never ever hear of. And this was a huge, explosion of talent, explosion of resources, explosion of management headaches and whatnot. And what that resulted in is this: growing pains. And this is a big thing for us, and I think that anyone who has an aspiration to be an indie developer should recognize that these kind of things can happen when your studio goes very fast. A lot of you probably are familiar with the article. I imagine a lot of you have read it. It was a big talk about thing, people come in. For us, we as a company were faced with a lot of challenges in how you grow rapidly. How do you evolve your culture? How do you evolve your management style when you go from 9 groups of friends to 100 people that are just trying to figure out how to build a game? When you're going, I don't know how many of you guys have ever got information about how companies grow. There are certain benchmarks that you pass through as an organization, and when you pass through those, the structure of how you work changes dramatically. One of the big ones that people talk about is 25 people. When you hit 25 people or so, things shift. When you hit 50 people or so, things shift. When you hit 100 people, things shift again. Like dramatic changes in how much HR resources you need to handle a company of that size. We went from 9 to 100 in a very, very rapid period of time. I'm going to read this quote because I think it's still very, very valid. This is what we did in response to the article, and I think it's important to read it. I'm going to make sure I read it right. Trendy is a fairly young indie video game developer experiencing some of the unfortunate issues associated with new companies finding their footing. Long hours, quick growth, and ongoing challenges stemming from working on a highly creative environment. Our management is focused on continuing to grow and develop a positive workplace despite these challenges. We are excited for the upcoming release of Dungeons and Defenders 2 and hope that consumers appreciate the results of our efforts. At the time, we had a really talented group of people that really just wanted to make great games, and we needed to figure out how in the world to do that. And to be honest, the studio at the beginning may not have been very successful with that. So we talked a lot about it. We became very introspective, and we tried to figure out, with the support of our investors, how do we move forward successfully, knowing that we had a lot of things to fix. And one of our incredible concept artists made this image for DD2. I thought it's really apt for what the personality of the studio was at then. And that's actually when I came on board with Trendy. So I started 2 years ago. I interviewed, honestly, about 2 weeks after the article broke. That's when I showed up. And I was actually not that interested in Trendy. I saw it, I'm like, oh, that's not where I want to be. This seems like a place that's not really the best fit for me in my career where I was going. And then I walked, but I'm like, you never turn down an interview. They wanted me to interview, I decided to show up. And I walked in the door, and that's when everything changed. This is a team of people that were so diehard, dedicated, and focused on making a successful game. It just bled out of them when you talk to them. And at that time, they were all kind of looking around. Leadership had changed, management had just changed over. The person who was running the ship, but no one was running the ship. It happened 2 weeks ago. They were all trying to look at each other going, hey, we're leads now. We have no idea what that means. What does it mean to lead a team of programmers, lead of artists? I've never done that before. But all of them were they wanted to do something they were proud of. They didn't want to do the MOBA anymore. They all knew that. But they weren't sure how to do what they wanted to do next. And I saw this group of people that were basically incredibly talented and on a mission to prove themselves to everybody and themselves, and went, oh my God, how can I not be a part of this? Like, this is a really, really cool opportunity. So I decided to take the shot and started Trendy. And that was a really challenging time because, we had this game we had to create, DD2, with incredible expectations. We are now resetting the entire project. So the studio had been working for almost 2 years on the MOBA. We threw the whole thing out. We're like, you know what, this is not what we want to make. This is not what our fans want. We're going to get rid of it. We had to try, and for all the veterans in the room who have worked at studios before, trying to build a game and pre-produce a game at the exact same time is very, very dangerous. And that's exactly what we had kicked off trying to do, because our development cycle had to be relatively quick. And so we're trying to be very agile and very fluid, while at the same time trying to discover how in the world to become a real studio and grow up into being a studio that had a culture that was going to be sustainable for the size and the talent that we had. And that was really challenging, but I think that what was most compelling for me is just how tenacious the team was. I talk about this when I mentioned interview candidates, and I think a few of you guys have actually interviewed at Trendy. There is so little ego in that studio. and it's just unbelievable. I've worked in the industry for a while, and I worked in business before that for about 8 or 9 years in management. I have never seen a group of people that just are solely focused on one thing, which is trying to make an awesome game. And whenever people have come in the door and talked to the people there, that's what they get. And it's just super, super exciting to see how that energy coalesces together to create something. So with that in mind, and trying to figure out how we move forward, we did this actually recently. We tried to figure out who we were and what we wanted to be as a company, what we wanted to build, how we wanted to move forward as Trendy. And so I'm going to read some of these things on here. This is kind of crystallized the last 2 years of our transformation as we've changed as a studio. So we are Trendy, empowering employees, developers, and players. We are setting trends, not following them. We build fun games and share our technology so other developers can too. Our mission statement: empower employees, empower developers, empower players, and create fun. I'm gonna stop there for a second because I think we use the word empower a lot in our studio, but it's a very has a very strong meaning for us. An example of how that works for us, I like telling this story. We don't really dictate out overtime or crunch. We don't believe in that. We believe in people deciding what they want to work on and owning that thing. And if they believe they want to pour themselves into it, that's their decision. And one of the ways we do that is really get a lot of buy-in and a lot of transparency for all the things that we do. And this is a reaction from what happened 2 years ago. What do we want to be, what kind of studio we want to be, and so that's the culture we work to create. An example of that, how many of you guys played Dungeon Defenders 2 or have been following it at all? A few of you? Okay. Jeremy raised his hand. We just had a very, very major patch that released, and it was the first time we did a boss experience. And the studio originally wasn't supposed to make a boss fight. We were like, oh, we're going to do a mini boss because bosses are too expensive. We can't afford the animation time. And the animators were like, listen, we really want to do these cool cinematic intros. We think they're going to really be meaningful for our player base. And so we were like, okay, we looked at the schedule. We had all this other work we needed to do with our new pets feature coming in. And we're like, you know what? You guys can do some cinematic work. We think we can fit it in, but we can only probably do 2 or 3 of them. And that's really the time that we have. And our animation team came back and said, we want to do 7. And we're like, guys, you can't do 7. Like, there's not enough hours in the day for you to do 7. It's not going to work out. And one of them came to my office. He goes, listen, I know what it's going to take, and I know we have to do these other commitments. If you let us do this, we promise you we'll make sure we get the other things done. We just really believe in this thing. Like, we think this is super important. And when someone comes to you like that, you're like, okay, man, like, all right, we're not going to get in your way. Those guys went crazy for 5 weeks. No one asked them to do anything. They decided they wanted to do it themselves. It was their decision. And I remember the weekend, so we do this thing, if you guys, anyone is production minded, we'll lock our builds. We'll do content and feature locking, and then we'll go through a finalizing process where we kind of finish the build for release, for patch release. And we had finaling on a Friday, and the animators came to me, and by the way, at this point, like, I've seen the videos, it looked phenomenal, like, in my opinion, one of the best in class in how cinematic's done, super, super cool. And they come to me and go, Brad, we want the weekend to work on polish. And I'm like, you guys have been killing yourselves for 5 weeks, take the weekend off. Like, please, I know it's past the content lock, but it's gonna be in a big video, it won't affect the build. Can we please do it? And I said, all right, I'm not, fine, whatever. Like, I'm not gonna stop you. So I came on Saturday for another reason, and I was watching what they were working on, and I kid you not, they were working on certain parts of the video, making sure the antennas for one of the creatures was animating more smoothly. And I mean, like, this thing is huge on the screen, and they're fixing the antennas because that's what they thought was important to them. That's what I mean when I say empowering employees. We really try to give people ownership and help them to make their decisions, and we believe as a studio that creates better games at the end of the day. And we're not perfect at it, but it's what we strive for. And I'll read the paragraph. Gaming should be about having fun and sharing that fun with those around you. At Trendy, we empower our employees to create games that they're passionate about. We build tools for our players to influence these games, and we share our technology with other developers so they can focus on making great games, not everything else. We want to make a contribution to the world of gaming through our products, our employees, and our technology. And that's what we believe as a team. And that's how we've been trying to move forward as a studio, as we've been working through these different projects. So how did we get to the point that we were able to put that together? We went and built a world-class management team. We had a big leadership change at Trendy. We brought on Dale Rodriguez, our CEO. He's been in the industry for 20 years. He ran LucasArts for a while. Anyone heard of LucasArts? Sure, a lot of you have. He worked at IGT for a long time. He was at Disney for a while. I mean, this guy is a really, I go to GDC with him, and like everyone knows him when you walk around. It's incredible. Extraordinary man, very, very talented leader. And when he decided to join the studio, it was incredible. If you ever have a chance to meet him or talk to him, the reason why he joined is the same reason why I did. He met the people and went, oh my goodness, how could I not want to be a part of this? Rob Moore and Marco Bussey, I think Jeremy and a few other guys that were at Tiburon, those are old Tiburon guys. Again, both 20-year vets, CTO and COO of our company now.
Marco was my first lead when I started 20 years ago in EA.
Yep. I hear stories.
For 2 years.
Every time Marco sees someone that has EA on their resume, he knows them. He was at Tiburon when they were like, what, 10 people, 15 people?
He was probably about employee 6 or 7.
Yeah.
He was very early.
And he was there as part of the explosive growth to what you guys know as Tiburon today. They joined us with Daryl, Linda, and then Drew Kirk. Linda's our CFO, old standing financial veteran, and then Drew Kirby. And you guys heard GameSpy, right? You know what GameSpy is? Drew was one of the guys who helped create that. He was in the original GameSpy team. He was there when they sold to Glue. I worked with Drew like 4 or 5 years ago. Anyone who ever worked on GameSpy products knew Drew. He was the head of their business department. So we built this incredible team that knew how to help execute on these products, and we started figuring out how to really make games better and different. And that leads us to DD2. So DD2 now, after the MOBA restart, is a free-to-play action tower defense RPG game. That's what we created. And it was one of those experiences where we really talked to our fans about what they wanted us to make, and we worked with them to make what we felt was the game that they wanted. One way that we did this, and I'll talk about another decision about this, one approach that we took. We had this thing called the Defense Council. We started back, and we're talking, we have been in development for about 3 or 4 months. And if you guys have built a game, when you're 3 or 4 months into a project, you're really not very much of anywhere, especially when you're in a large scale project. We had very little vertical slices. We were doing pre-production at the same time. We had 500 or so people donate money to charity, which was awesome. They didn't give us a dime. We raised money for charity through this. And those 500 people joined our defense council. We would give them builds of the game for a weekend. We'd say, hey, here's the game for a weekend. Check it out. Give us feedback. And we would put up like one map with a hero that has a tower and an ability or something, like broken mechanics, basically unbalanced. And then we would sit down and do live streams with them. We had a special forum for them. We used their feedback and start making changes to the game. And as we grew the product and started adding more and more features, we used them to kind of check and balance ourselves as we developed. Really challenging to kind of open kimono yourself when you're at the very beginning. I mean, when your game is not done and you're getting feedback from people and they're like, oh my gosh, this is awful. And you're going, oh my gosh, it's not even close to being done yet. Like, give us a second. That happened a lot. But it was also very, very powerful for us because we got a lot of information from them that helped us make a better game. One story I like to tell. So we, as a team, when we started DD2, we felt like our action combat from DD1 wasn't very good. We used the term lawnmower effect. This is what DD1 was. You just went and walked around and did this. And you just swung in front of you like a lawnmower and things died. And it was not that rewarding feeling when it came to combat being visceral. So we wanted to make combat more fun, more engaging. We wanted to add a little bit of motion into it, let the animations have more weight. And we were focusing on that. And usually when you focus on something, other things can be a little bit neglected. So we were trying to make the abilities rewarding, the connection of attacks really good, and the tower defense part of the game wasn't necessarily getting the love that the community wanted to. And so coming into like the first major unveiling of the game, we were at Comic-Con, we were getting this feedback from the council, and it's like, guys, we know what you're trying to do with the whole ability thing, but realize it's still a tower defense game, you're doing it wrong. Like, it's not what we really wanted to see. And so we went back to the drawing board, all the design team came into a room, and we rebalanced the entire game. We're like, you know what, let's throw it all the way we were doing it before and shift it back as we want it. We made all the towers twice their size they were originally. We redid all the feedback for the towers to make them more rewarding. We started focusing on that part of the gameplay. We probably would have screwed that up and missed that if it hadn't been for the Defense Council. They were a really big part of getting that voice in. And you'll hear that, I'm sure, from your teachers about focus testing and trying to get feedback from players. You just don't know how valuable that is until you get that input in. You will always be too close to your game. No matter how much you try not to be, you always will be. And getting that feedback from the fans who will, by the way, eventually know your game infinitely better than you ever will, even if you think you do, really helps you understand what you're building. So it was really fun. We went to NYCC. That was the first unveil of the reboot, and a whole bunch of people came out. And we had lines wrapped around the booth the entire time, and everyone was like, thank goodness you're not making the MOBA anymore. That's awesome. And by the way, this is really, really cool. We like this. And then when we continued forward, and we went to PAX, and we went to the next PAX, and we kept on getting the same feedback. We really, really love what you're doing. It's a successor to DD1 that we wanted. It feels really awesome. So in December, we went to live on early access. And that was a big thing for us too, because we're going to be a free-to-play game. So we're trying to figure out, how do you be a free-to-play game but early access successfully? And how do we message that to players? And that was a really fun challenge we had to deal with. Trying to tell people, hey, this is why we're doing this. We're not doing this for bug fixing. We're not using our QA team, which, to be honest, I feel like a lot of early access products do. That we have a QA team, we pay them. They find our bugs. We need you guys so that we can grow the audience and figure out what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong, and then react to that. And by the way, we've been doing it for the entire life cycle of the product, like thing after thing. We had an entire way of doing loot. We literally ripped the entire thing out, redid entire new assets, and replaced it 1 week, a month and a half before early access went live because of feedback from our community. And we've been doing things like that since then. Trying to get your community to know that was a big challenge. So we would do things like dev streams every single Thursday and Friday. We would produce video content that would explain what we were doing. We'd post on our blog religiously about we have kind of a rule in our studio right now. If we are going to change something about the the gameplay dynamic of our game, say we're going to change the way players play it, that doesn't happen until we tell the community first. Even if it makes the game incredibly better, we don't release that patch until we've preambled it. And the reason why is because you don't know how people are using the mechanics that you currently have in the game. You don't know what they're doing with it. They may be exploiting something that they really, really enjoy, and you're about to wreck that thing and make a whole bunch of people mad. So we make sure we telegraph things weeks in advance. We have a big patch coming out. We just removed our entire skills system and replaced it with something else. We talked to people about it literally 4 weeks ahead of time. We had our designer go on one of the dev streams, and he actually did his game design presentation to our community. Like the one that we reviewed in the meeting room, he gave it to the entire community. This is what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. Here's all the crazy changes we're going to make. Do you like it? Do you don't like it? What do you think? And that really allowed us to get a lot of back and forth with them before we released. It's been incredibly valuable to us. So, and since some of you guys haven't seen what the game looks like, I'm going to play 2 pieces of content for you real quick. The first one, if anyone watched the Video Game Awards this year, this was a trailer that was on the Video Game Awards. We were a part of that program. And it kind of is a good teaser. Hopefully the audio works. We'll see. No, it doesn't. Is there something I need to push to turn it on?
The console on your right?
This one?
Maybe?
Does anyone know?
Look at it. Let's proof that up.
The new John shouldn't have left.
I did this for a while.
Is this thing on here that's not turned on?
No, it should be this thing.
Set the default to the restaurant.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that too. Actually, let me lower this if I drop below your house. Yeah, so it's probably gonna be this. No.
This is why you always
Mixer?
test.
Could it be set down in the mixer? Maybe?
That's true.
If you open up the PowerPoint presentation before you set it to the Crestron, sometimes it will then come.
Well, this is always set up on the Crestron. This the one that's built in up here. Yeah, that's really funky.
Is the receiver on? Because
Got those my ass down here.
Looks like it's on.
JR is very upset if anybody goes in there.
Yeah, it looks like
It's
it's
funny because
on.
my son finished 5th grade.
Oh, we're hearing something.
Graduation today, and they had one of those, like they show up.
All right.
They had to
Thank
say-
you. All right.
Both that was all.
Good famous.
short teaser trailer that went live right before we went live on early access. And then this is a cool video that our marketing director and one of our creative directors put together, talking about the patch before it came out recently. You can show you some of the content we've been working on.
Hey guys, my name is PM Asher.
I'm Danny Enright.
And we're here to reveal you our new patch, Pets and Dragons.
Yes, our number one feature today, bugs.
Yeah, so pets, they're really cool to activate. What did you say?
Bugs.
Dude, it's pets. We talk about
Pets,
pets.
no.
Bugs last.
Pets. Sorry, oh my, pets. I meant pets. Pets are divided up into species. Now, species are basically the equivalent of what a pet was in BD1. It'll dictate your stats, your abilities to look. You'll find your eggs, you'll take your eggs to the hatchery, you'll wait 8 hours for it to hatch, and then you'll have a pet that you can level up with experience and with pet food.
So wait, what if I get a pet that doesn't have the stats I want? Do I have to wait another 8 hours?
You don't have to wait. We'll have reroll items, which will be the primary way that you can reroll your pet's stats. So our next feature is the Life Fruit Forest Adventure. With this adventure, we'll be releasing 3 awesome new maps, 3 new incursions, and our first BD2 boss.
A dragon.
Wyvern. It's
No, man, it's a dragon. It walks on all 4 legs.
It walks on its wings, which makes it a wyvern.
We'll stop there. So in addition to the dragon boss that's in the Life Fruit Forest Adventure, there's also a new quest system. Now the quest system allows you to get a quest from the Squire's dad every day, and then if you complete this quest in Life Fruit Forest Adventure, you get a wyvern token. And you can use these wyvern tokens to redeem a bunch of really cool stuff from the adventure, like pet eggs, lockbox keys, and even Uber skill spheres.
So, speaking of skill spheres, what is a skill sphere?
Skill spheres are the new way that you can customize your heroes in Dungeon Defenders 2. As you level up with a hero, you'll unlock sphere slots, which you can put small and medium spheres into, which lets you change your character's stats, or you can put large skill spheres in, which will actually completely change the way a character behaves. For example, the Apprentice has a freeze sphere, which actually makes his frostbite tower freeze enemies. And then there's Uber spheres, which are just the coolest thing in the world.
Uber spheres will drastically change your towers and abilities. You can get those Uber spheres, the first ones at least, by playing our first adventure, the Life Fruit Forest.
So the last big feature in this patch is costumes and accessories.
That's right, costumes are really cool. Costumes will fundamentally alter the way your character looks. Some are going to go so far even as to have custom animation, custom VFX.
So the ninja monkey has like the smoke bomb that he throws down when he spawns in.
And Phil just volunteered to make that completely by himself.
Okay, that's not in the game, but those are some ideas that we're going to do in the future.
And on top of all that, we're also going to have a really cool feature called accessories. Now, accessories are going to be how you can tailor your costume to more your individual liking.
So what's really cool about accessories, you can actually find them in lockboxes. So if you get Wyvern tokens from playing the Life Fruit Forest Adventure, you can actually get free accessories, or if you want, you can just purchase them with premium currency. I think actually one of the cooler features in our costume system is in mythical accessories. And what mythical accessories allow you to do is upgrade your costume as you play with it. So if you play with Red Riding Huntress, you can actually upgrade her mythical accessories into werewolf,
Red Lichen
Huntress.
Red Werewolf.
So thanks guys, there's a ton of stuff in this patch. If you purchased early access to the Defense Council, you'll notice that you'll have almost all of your rewards now in the game when you go to the mailbox. If you're a Call Pack purchaser, we'll be emailing you some of your rewards, and obviously some things like power skins and such are still not in the game. There's a ton of other features too. If you are watching this video from our new patch notes page, please let us know how you like it, and enjoy the game. Thanks guys.
Thanks,
So that was our crazy enormous patch we put out about a month and a half ago. And this was a big thing because it was, you can see the amount of content that was in this patch. It was enormous. There was about a year plus of minus things going in that one, so it was a fun thing to final. So you can kind of even see how we're telegraphing, hey, by the way, it's probably broken. And by the way, there's bugs. Don't be mad. So that was always fun. One thing that I think is worth mentioning is that another aspect that we deal with is being a game that was retail and now going free to play, and trying to figure out how to handle that transition for our customers who are honestly mostly really wanting a non-free to play version. There's a couple reasons why I made that decision. One, when we looked at the purchasing behavior of our community, people wanted more content for Dungeon Defenders. They bought a lot of DLC. We made about 40-50% of our revenue on DLC, and people seemed to really enjoy that. They talked very positively about it when they got it. They didn't like the fact that we released like 30 of them, but they really liked the fact that there was more stuff coming out. So we talked about that as a concept and went, it seems like this is a kind of experience that players would like, giving them a whole bunch of stuff and then just keep on adding to it over time. We can't do that in the retail business model very effectively. So we decided to go free to play. But in doing that, we also need to figure out the right way to do free to play for our game. So we actually borrow a phrase from, how many of you guys have ever heard of Path of Exile? Cool, a few of you guys. Path of Exile is a free to play Diablo inspired type game. It's a loot grind isometric game. And they coined a phrase called ethical monetization, which we very generously borrow from them. We're actually friends with them. They're really cool guys. And what we mean when we say that is that we desire, or we don't ever plan to do monetization that impacts gameplay loops. You know, our goal is to keep all those things separated. So even for some of our cosmetics, there's non-premium pass for them, but most of our things that are monetized are completely separated from gameplay. So it's like buy a costume, buy a tower skin, buy a pet skin down the road, expand your inventory, but none of that is gamified. Inside of those systems, we may do things that make them interesting and make them gamified. So one idea that I really like that we did is our cosmetic system, when you decide to buy one of your mythical cosmetics, you actually can play with that and then level it up and make it look cooler. That doesn't really impact the game, but it's still kind of an RPG-ish type component that you can get if you decide to spend money. So it offers depth and interesting expansions of the game without actually impacting power or progression or things that people want to acquire. We don't do boosts. We'll never do individual boosts. We don't want to do anything that gives people an advantage over somebody else. We really try to focus on that ethical monetization approach, and we think it's been very useful for us. And people are finally getting the message. That's good. For a while, they thought we were going to do it and sell weapons, and that was fun trying to convince them we weren't. One last thing I want to talk about is influence. If anyone has paid attention to the D2 community, another really cool thing that we're doing, again, as part of our mantra of wanting to include not just our developers, but the community and how we build the game, we have this system we launched in alpha in December called Influence. And the way Influence works, every day when you log into the website or when you log into the game, you get a point, an influence point. You can get up to 2 a day. And you accumulate these points every single day, and you can use them on things that we call initiatives to vote on decisions about the game. We take sometimes really big game design decisions, put them up in the influence system and say, hey guys, for 2 weeks this decision's going to be out there. You guys can vote. Whichever one wins, that's what we're doing. And we've been experimenting with that. We have some votes that we found were very interesting and some votes that were not. One thing we've noticed, whether it's just because of where the game is right now or because this is what we think people actually care about, people have not been as excited about lore and art votes. They're really, really excited about gameplay votes and game design votes. Just an interesting piece of information that we've been noticing. They also seem to really like game design votes that are very impactful. So for a while we were doing votes like, hey, we have these things that we want to build, but we're not sure what to build first because we only have a certain amount of resources. So should we build, should we focus on this kind of content or that kind of content? Should we focus on these kind of features or that kind of features? And they actually did not like those votes. They're like, if you're going to give it to us anyways, eventually, then why ask us when to get first? We don't care. Just give it to us now, basically. We really want to decide about actual decisions on the game. We did one vote that was a pretty big decision point. We had about 40,000 votes cast, 20,000 on each side. It was actually very, very split. And tremendous volume of arguments and discussions in the forums about which way it would go. It was about a reward system for our new Onslaught game mode. So it's been very, very cool watching this mature. And what's fun is that the more we've been doing this, people are actually talking about it more and more. There are not, there's only 1 or 2 studios that I know that are even attempting to do something kind of like this. And from what I know, we're the only one that's really branding it and trying to make it a thing. Like, this is how we want to build Dungeon Defenders 2 as a product throughout its entire life cycle, not just through early access. So it's been really, really fun and kind of neat to see people getting involved with that. And feel free to check it out. If you go to our website, you actually get to see some of the stuff on there. Last thing I want to do is just pop up some reviews, just because I think it's cool to show what people think about it. I'll let you read them on your own as I'm talking. To be honest, we are so honored that people have been positive about our game so far. We're sitting at very positive on Steam, about 83-84% on the reviews. It's been, a number of people have said it's one of the highest quality, if not the highest quality early access game on Steam right now. That was how we approached it. Our goal was to not release a buggy game. Our goal was to try to release something that was relatively solid, a lot of content to play. We had 10 maps when we went into early access. We had tens of hours. We had people that played 100 hours in the first couple months. So our goal was to prove the game in early access, not make a game in early access. And it's been really exciting to see how people have responded to that. So that's kind of the studio and the game in a nutshell. I know Jeremy is kind of also available to answer questions, but I really want to give you guys a chance to ask me about the studio, what we do, and kind of go back and forth. So I'll open up the floor for questions now. Yeah.
As far as like an engine goes, do you guys use proprietary software, or do you use any particular engines?
You want to
Yeah,
answer?
we are building in Unreal, but we're working off of Unreal 3 UDK with the source code license. It's a fairly highly modified version of UDK at this point because it's got some legacy changes from all the way through those MOBA years and on to now. So there's a little bit of legacy on it, but it's Unreal Engine development.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just also to that point, we've discussed as a development group the ideas of Unreal 4 and kind of what that looks like as far as trying to migrate and get onto the newest. And right now we're sticking with UDK because the Unreal 4 is a big. You guys do a lot of work in Unreal here, right? It's a big delta between the two. So with the customizations we've got, it's the best place for us right now.
Yeah, a lot of the modifications are really about not just all of our gameplay setup, but we've done a lot of core engine modifications for how we distribute content and patches. So Playverse, which I mentioned before, is a complete backend solution. It does patching, it does content management, package management, everything. And if anyone has ever tried to, on the engine side, mess with Unreal's package system and the way that they synchronize packages when you cook, it's very, very difficult to patch Unreal without having to do the whole thing over again. They serialize this piece of information in every single package. So we've actually gone into the way the cooker works and modify it so we can do very, very smaller size patches when we modify content instead of actually having to do the whole thing. That's just one example of some of the really low-level modifications we made to the engine to support our content pipelines and how we wanted the game to work. So it was Unreal's 4 shiny. That's cool. It'd take us probably a couple of years to get to where we're at now, so we decided to hold off. I saw another question over here. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for coming and speaking. So one thing that struck me was the influence system that you talked about.
Mhm.
That seems such new territory. So I'm curious to know if you have any arrows in your back as far as some dangers in those waters when you open those cans of worms as two players.
It's funny you mentioned that. I'm not going to say who, because I might get in trouble for saying who. We talked to it's a company all of you guys know, to put it that way. We went and visited someone to talk about influence specifically before it went live. And I actually talked about this with them a number of years ago when we were first coming up with the idea. And when we came to them, there was a person in the room that said, "This thing terrifies me as a developer," because there's a lot of different reasons why. One, you're always going to disappoint one segment of your audience, so how do you deal with that? Two, when you're giving these kind of decisions over to the audience, they don't always know what's the best decision to make for the game. So how do you manage that? How do you deal with giving them decisions that, if they're big decisions, they may see things on the surface that aren't actually underneath. And then three, and one of the actually more scary things is, how do you manage expectations for this kind of thing consistently? Because you're going to have people that are going to start feeling like they have control of something, and you're going to want to make a change that goes against that control, and then you're going to make them disappointed or upset. So how do you deal with that as a paradigm shift? And they were talking about how their title has millions and millions of players. We're still relatively small in comparison, tens of millions of players for that matter. And they're like, our audience is always angry. They're also always happy, but they're always angry. If we were to do something like this, everybody be angry. So how do you handle that? And we were talking about this, they're very legitimate points. Like, how do we handle these circumstances? Our thoughts are, there's a lot of, and this is a really, I hate using pithy phrases, but democratization of content, like that concept, you got to create content, own content, and have an influence over that. I use the word right there. It's a natural tendency right now in how people are consuming what they find entertaining. So I welcome the challenge. We don't know how to use it very well, to be honest. We're still trying to figure it out. We have a lot of misfires. We'll have one where we'll put it out there and we think, we're going to love this. Here's a decision that's actually kind of a cool content decision. And we get a lot of people it's funny, they're angry because it wasn't a game decision. And we're like, this is still an important decision we need to make. And that's okay, they don't care, but it's just valid for us to start learning, okay, these are the things that are positives versus negatives. Honestly, the hardest challenge is for the game design team. Because we have a lot of, it's funny, we'll sometimes have an argument about something and go, hey, this would probably make a really cool influence to the vote. Cool, let's talk about it. And we start going through that process, and we've gone all the way to almost to print. I have recorded, so I didn't talk about this, I actually do a show. I have a little YouTube show that I run. I do one every about 2 or 3 weeks where I interview someone from the studio and we talk about the influence vote. We recorded an influence video, we wrote up the vote, and then we pulled it. Because right at the very end, we got the answer to the question. And like we were about to ask them this or this, and the game design team, as we were preparing all this, went, you know what? I actually think this is the right way to do it. We probably shouldn't ask them anymore. And so we just yanked the whole thing and put it in front of them. So it's really tricky, and we're navigating that as we go. We'll see how it turns out. So far, it's been good, but it's tough.
To navigate that a little bit, to sort of address one of the questions that was put forward, like for a lot of the decisions, are the votes that you put out there like, well, we have two solutions to this problem, they're both equally good. You have proponents of each decision on your teams. Are those the kind of decisions that you put out? So whatever decision is made, the studio wins?
Yeah.
Sort of thing?
That's what we're aiming for. I'll give you an example. The most contentious vote we've done so far. So we have a new game mode we're making called Onslaught. It's kind of like a survival game mode where you can play forever. And we had two different thoughts on the design side of how we wanted to handle the reward structure. On one idea, we were going, players are often tired of waiting for people. So we wanted a player to be able to set what kind of reward they want at the very beginning of an Onslaught session. I want pet rewards, or I want weapon rewards, or I want gear, or whatever. And then as you're surviving, as you're continuing through, every 3 waves you get a reward, it would be on the one that you chose. That was option 1. Option 2, people like to min-max what they get. They want to be able to decide what they get every single time. So every single time you hit the reward section, every 3 waves you get the chance to pick between those things every single time. This time I want pets, this time I want swords, this time I want gear. I can make that choice as I progress. And we were like, one of them gives you a lot more control, a lot more choice, but if you have 4 people in a co-op game, it could be slower. The other one is a lot less choice, it's very focused, but if you're in a co-op game, it can go very, very fast. And we're like, they both could be good. We actually can see pluses and minuses for both decisions, and neither of them are bad decisions. To the community it goes. And people lost their minds. That was a really contentious one. The vote was within 300 points, and the votes had 20,000 plus on each side. And it was like thousands of people arguing, debating about this thing. And honestly, I'll be blunt, I honestly thought the choice one was going to win. Because on paper, I'm thinking, these are Dungeon Defenders fans, they're min-maxers, they like finding the stats, they like finding that best build. So they're going to want to be able to choose and have control. The one that won was the easy one. Pick your reward once and let it set the whole time. That actually kind of surprised me a little bit. And it was really the people just going, this would be a convenience factor, I'd much rather just choose it once. So those are the kind of decisions we're trying to make. We've flirted with other ones. We actually tried recently to do a philosophical design vote. Do you want horizontal progression for items versus vertical progression for items? And which one do you prefer? And we're going to try to create features more around that. That one went okay, but we found decisions a lot more clean. Because even when we try to give them something that we think they care about, it was hard for the mass audience to digest the question, especially when it's a design type question. So yeah, that's what we're trying to do. We've talked.
Do you use it primarily as sort of like a retention or like an engagement with the current base, or do you also use it as like a way to kind of like evangelize and get more people bought in?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, to be honest. I mean, you how do I say this? You want to make sure that the people who are going to be your most ardent fans are really happy and excited about what you're doing. You're building, especially when you're doing a sequel. There's a lot of stories of sequels where a game will make an iteration of version 2 and go in a very dramatically different direction. Even if that was a better game, the people who should be their acolytes don't care. They're angry. So we are really taking a lot of time to communicate to, whether you call them the core audience or whatnot, figure out what they want and what they like and really engage with them and talk with them. And we do that actively. Then we also are aiming at this to be show people that we're doing things different than other people in early access. Because early access has a lot of stigmas around it right now. To be honest, you have some people that are doing early access well. I think Prison Architect is a good example of, in Kerbal Space Program. There are some games out there that are really being innovative in how they're approaching it. And you have guys that are just honestly, and there's no offense to those teams, I know they work hard, but they're just shoveling things out there because they need a revenue source to help honestly keep the lights on most of the time. And that's a hard problem to solve when you're a small team, but it tarnishes what early access could be used for a little bit. So you have customers coming in going, I don't play early access games. Like I don't want to play just stuff that's not finished. And we're saying, hey, that's not what we're trying to do, and tell people about that, because the more people we get involved, the better game we're going to make for everybody. So it's honestly it's both parts. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you kind of had these weekend sessions where you had people play your game.
Yeah.
And get opinion. How do you balance getting that opinion and making game changing decisions without, or I guess it's more like, how big has to be the sample before you decide that, yes, this doesn't work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really good question, and it's one that we debate about a lot when we're trying to make a decision, especially because and like it took us a while to make the decision to flip back more towards tower defense focus, because we took some of our, we were a very successful game, and our kind of our closest competitor was Orcs Must Die, and Orcs Must Die is a little more action oriented, and so we were like, there's a whole audience out there that likes that kind of game, and maybe that's a bigger audience than we have right now, so we need to be really careful in how we evaluate that. Honestly, most of it came down to having good game instinct, I guess, as a developer, and looking for patterns, like sequences of feedback that you get. So usually would not make a change based on one session. We wouldn't say, oh, these people complained about this, they made it was broken or poorly received. We hear notes and go, okay, that's valid, let's think about that. Let's focus test something off the street and see if that has a similar reaction. Let's observe it at NYCC or one of these big shows and see what kind of feedback we get. Let's ask questions directly to our community, like try to dig down to what they're really getting into, and then based on that, make that change. I'll give a very, very good example. So when we did our loot system, we knew we were going to do cosmetics. We knew we were going to do cosmetics for monetization, because that's an easy way to monetize that's not gameplay oriented. And our challenge was that we're a gear game. So it's like if I put on a new chess piece that doesn't change the way I look visually, that's confusing. Like it doesn't make any sense. It's a giant glowing chess piece that I put on. Why did it change my character? Well, because we want you to spend money changing it with your character. So we debated about that a lot, and we decided, okay, we don't want to release chests and hats and gloves and boots for a gear. We want to do something different so it's not confusing. So we came up with this thing called our relic system. And relics were a tough sell because they were a little bit visually confusing. We had totems, rings, and I can't remember the third one. And for a year, the community was telling us we really don't like this. And we're like, okay, they want us to remove it, put in chest, gloves, whatever. And we're like, no, it's going to be confusing, we want to fix it. And so we iterated again. We added this cool V effect around it and added, like, the V effect was the shape of a chess piece or whatnot. And we put that out there, and they're like, still doesn't make any sense. And we had our own people that were going, this doesn't make any sense. Like, what in the world are we doing? I have a totem that says a glove around it. Like, what does that even mean? It just was confusing. We were overcomplicating it, and we couldn't figure out what to do because we didn't want to make it visually confusing, but we also didn't know how to make it really easily digestible. And eventually, we had a live stream, a dev stream at the session. We're like, listen, here's why we're doing this decision. Here's why we're struggling with the relic thing. We don't know how to fix this. And they go, we understand, like there's a community saying, we understand that's why you did that. We don't care. We actually just want chests, gloves, boots, and hats, and we don't care if it doesn't change our visual look anymore. And we're going, all right, fine, we'll do it. Like, we'll rip the whole thing out. We spent a year iterating on this thing. We threw all of it away and spent a month and a half generating meshes, assets to put in the game that were boots and chests and whatnot, and replaced it. And they're all just like, it works. It makes sense now. And we're like, I wish we had done that 6 months ago and saved us time. But that's a good example of, like, we had that feedback coming in. We as developers knew the problem we were trying to solve, and we weren't convinced yet that the feedback we were getting was the right thing, and we didn't want to knee-jerk react. So we actually iterated a few times before we finally decided to pull the plug on that one. There are other examples where we iterate a few times and we're successful. That's when we had to change. And it's just figuring out how to navigate that as a developer is part of being a developer, I guess. I think there's a question back here. Yeah.
You talk about engaging the community actively. My concern is how do you maintain the element of surprise? Because if you're telling them everything about your game, then why would they want to look forward to the next patch if they already know what's in the box? Right.
So this would be a great question for Phil Asher, our marketing director. A good example of that is the Pets and Dragons preview you just saw. So people didn't know what we were doing on that like months and months in advance. We actually scheduled it out. So we had beats in our marketing plan where it's like, all right, the most contentious ones, the ones we were concerned about the most, like the skills first thing I was talking about, that one we announced 5 weeks ahead of time. Hey, this is the thing we're doing. Betsy, the boss, they didn't know about until a week. Because the boss didn't really have much of an impact on like the things that people were going to care about, so we could do that a lot closer. We teased it, but we didn't show it. When the boss unveil came out, we actually use our we have we call it the Casters Guild. It's a collection of streamers that are fans of DD2 and stream our game frequently. We actually have this Casters Guild unveil the boss. They played a preview build 1 week before the patch went out, and everyone lost their minds. Like, oh my God, it's a boss! That was really, really exciting. So that's what we kind of balance that out versus, the risk of holding something and not giving it enough time to basically figure out if that was a bad decision or not versus the surprise. And it's tricky, but it works. And a lot of it is just scheduling. Yeah.
For the feedback that you get from your defense counsel and players and that sort of thing, when you release a build for a weekend, do you oftentimes release that build with specific questions in mind?
Yeah.
So did you tailor any sort of feedback forms or something along with that to
Yep.
get stuff back from them?
Yeah, so, and granted, this was before early access when we were doing this. This was the first year of development. Our community manager, Josh Isom, he would pretty heavily communicate, and we do it through posts on the private forum. Hey, this is what's in this build. Like, we've revamped the stat system, or we've added a new scaler for enemies, or whatever it may be, or this is a new map that we want to get your guys' notes on. We would release it with very, very specific goals in mind, and we would have, I can't remember I think it's SurveyMonkey. We use SurveyMonkey to send out surveys that had very specifically aimed questions at the community. Here are the things that we cared about, and then we would go wider as the survey went on. So we'd start very, very specific. Here are the 4 or 5 things we want to know, and then later on, what do we don't know that you want to tell us about? And then we would digest those all together. Another tool that we would use, though, we would do, it's kind of like heat mapping for forum activity. We would, every week, especially during those time frames, we would have someone in our community team tallying all the different main topics that we're talking about, even if they're coming up in disparate threads. If someone was complaining about this aspect or that aspect, say, hey, people don't like targeting the repair ability, and that came up 7 different times in 6 different threads. We would look at volume of feedback coming in for different topics and use that. Again, to the question earlier, we would see pattern setting. It's like, man, it's been 5 different sessions in a row where this keeps on being at the top 1 or 2 things people are talking about. That's probably something we need to address. So it would be kind of a combination of aimed feedback and then looking for the general feedback so we can make better decisions. And by the way, we still do that. We get regular community reports all the time. Usually once a week, we go through and look at all of the crazy things people are complaining about and things they like, and use that to make decisions. Yeah.
I was wondering, how many artists do you have at your company?
Oh gosh, exact tally? I have to count in my head. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 or so. The team is a little bit smaller than it was at the MOBA days. We're about 70-ish right now between all disciplines. And that's spread across concept art, 3D art, animation, VFX. Yeah.
And do your artists, do they have to fill like lots of different roles, or do they are your artists more like specialized, or?
Well, so kind of the whole point about empowering developers, we really believe in trying to find what people in our studio want to do the most and then opening doors up for them. They might not be what they're doing right now. We really work hard to offer those opportunities down the road. I'll give you a good example. We had a VFX artist that was mostly working on VFX creation for abilities and towers and things like that. And he started getting really excited about learning tech art and getting more into optimizing maps and going through and doing mesh compositing and things like that. And so we actually looked at our schedule. We had a little bit of overage on the VFX side and shifted him. It just depends on, honestly, the developer and what kind of things they're most excited about, which we try to make it that way. All that said, we do have a tendency to be a little more generalized because we're not a 200-person studio. Honestly, the DD2 team specifically is about 40-ish, 45, with all the different guys who are only working on DD2. So you'll have a concept artist that will sometimes work on UI, will work on characters, will work on map paint overs and map paintings, that kind of thing. You'll have 3 artists that will do map assets, like environment assets, will also work on weaponry and gear, and sometimes we'll even work on costumes and like character art stuff. So it just depends on the discipline. Our animators do everything. Those guys are crazy. Our animation team is just, they're the hard, I mean, everyone's super hard worker, I can't wait, but they blow me away all the time. They do all the rigging, they do the cinematics, which you guys saw, which by the way I think just blow me away, they look so good. And then all the other animation. It's a team of like 3 people. They're just insane.
Have you taken many interns in the past, and how much would you say, if at all, like, do you empower the interns to do things?
We have not taken any interns since I've been there. We did before. We're about to start doing that again. Mm-hmm. So I know Jeremy and some of the programmers, Rob Moore, our CTO, they're working on an intern program for engineers right now, and we're starting to try to get ready to bring on some interns, honestly, the next couple of weeks to the next month or 2. We're actively right now looking for marketing interns. So there is at least 1 or 2 open positions for that. And marketing encompasses both how we're doing all these crazy fun releases as well as the community engagement aspect I was talking about. And usually the way we talked about, at least, working with interns is giving them very similar responsibilities and inputs that the rest of the people in our studio have. You know, it sounds like a line, but it's not. Like we really try to open the doors to everyone in the studio to have input, regardless. We have contractors and they get involved in input. You know, even guys who are not employees, because in our opinion, the more feedback we can have, the better decisions we can make. That makes it really challenging sometimes. To be honest, the production challenges of dealing with that many inputs, game design, trying to make good decisions when you have 45, 50 really passionate people all telling you how you think something they should think something should be, that can be tough, but we still think at the end of the day help us make better decisions, so we do it.
Yeah, and on the technical side, I'll be somebody who would have a lot of influence over what that internship program looks like. And I am a big believer in, to that point, empowering, putting an intern into a situation that is real. It's not just like hiring somebody to come in and do some grunt work refactoring or anything like that.
Yeah.
You're really trying to assess whether an individual can come and be an important part of your team. It's also a trial for them to see, is this a place that I want to make a future out of? I think an internship is that two-way, is a two-way street like that. And so I can say on the technical side that I'm a big believer in exactly the way Brad put it, of just being a normal member of the team for the duration that they're there.
I'll give you a quick story. I like stories, I guess. I don't know. I have time. I was a teacher a very long time ago, and my students used to always tell me, they would, actually it was high school, and they'd like sit down and like, oh, story time with Brad. I've gotten better at not being so detailed about them, but one of our build masters, we have a build master, Ben Boudin, and he was an engineer before, and we were like, listen, you're gonna be a build master. Like, I know you want to do programming, and that's awesome, and if you want that as your career path down the road, great, but we actually really need a build master, and that's what you're gonna be doing. It's a different skill set. And he's like, well, if I have extra time, if I want to invest time, can I also do like maybe some bug fixing? And we're like, as long as you get your stuff done, whatever. Like we'd love for you to help. And so he is himself, even though it's not part of his job description, found extra time in his weeks to actually jump in and help the engineering team fix a bug or two every once in a while. And he'll ask the lead engineer, hey, what's one that I can handle and not screw up? And then like Hava will go, here you go, work on this one. And he'll be working on a bug and debugging it at the same time he's working on other work. So like I said, we try to open as many doors for people as we can. Honestly, it's the reason why I work in studios like this. You can work at the big studios and there's advantages to that. There's some really cool things that you can learn there. But the opportunity, I think, to magnify your learnings by working in a place where that much ownership can exist and that much the opportunity is really based on how good you are, that's a really cool thing. And that's why I chose to be here. I really like that. Other questions? I don't want to cut anything short if anyone. There's a couple hands up that dropped. Yeah.
What percentage of your work, any sort of work that goes into it, is contract versus like part of the studio? 100%?
You mean employees versus contractors?
Yeah.
I don't know the percentage. It's maybe 5 or 10% contractors. It's pretty small. I mean, most of our people, we prefer employees. Sometimes we have like guys who work off-site, and we usually do employees on-site and off-site contractors. Not always, but usually. So like we have a game designer in Houston. He's a contractor. We have a VFX concept artist that's in Russia, actually. He's a contractor. It just depends on the skill set and opportunity.
Cool. Thanks.
Nothing else? Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And if any of you guys are interested in more information about the studio, I have some cards with me. I'd love to pass them out, and I'll be hanging around for a little while if anyone wants to come and chat with me. Cool. Thanks.
Thank you.